American children don't have food, not enough food to have safe lives where they're being harmed. We have to take care of our own first. America's like a lifeboat. If you and I were on a lifeboat and it was going down...
So,
Mike, I think
go ahead, Mike.
I think, Mike, first of all, you said because you would have to deport him because of the law. If you had the opportunity, would you change the law?
You're missing my point.
No, but would you change the law?
No, I wouldn't, and I'll tell you why I wouldn't. Because the whole world, half the world lives below the poverty line. If we don't make clear distinctions...
You don't think there's any room left in this country
I think there's room. We admit 1.1 million plus immigrants every year, and we put them on the pathway to citizenship. But at what point do you say that's it?
All right, let's consider, I want you to consider a pathway to citizenship that is now being considered. Harry Reid has said in the lame duck session of Congress he wants to take up the DREAM Act. Nancy Pelosi has said she wants to take up the DREAM Act. Maria Teresa, outline for us what the DREAM Act is and how it would help Celso.
Right, so the DREAM Act basically what it does is that it provides a pathway to citizenship for individuals that are 16 years or older, younger, been here for 5 years, and have demonstrated that, one, they want to still serve the military, as Celso would like to do, and number two, if they would like to go to school. And they have to be, and it's a pathway to citizenship. It's not guaranteed. And this is the issue. When we start talking about our American identity, who are we? We start talking about pulling ourselves by the bootstraps, going up and against all odds, and fundamentally trying to beat those odds. Who more than a DREAM Act kid who's been able to demonstrate that?
One quick point. Listen, the DREAM Act, the M in DREAM Act, the M in DREAM Act says minor. If you look at the House bill, it said aliens up to their 35th birthday would be eligible. The Senate bill has no age cutoff. One of the problems we have with this debate is that the language very often is deceptive and misleading, and I think American people are upset about it because I think we're generous people. We are the 911 to the world. When there's a crisis, we show up, and we show up with more than anybody.
But we're immigrants, right? I mean, that's our identity. And when you start saying, you know what, you are incredibly qualified. I mean, the biggest tragedy right now...
But what about the age cutoff?
But one of the biggest tragedies right now is that we're telling people, you know what, we need teachers, we need healthcare workers, we need engineers,
so, Mike,
and we have them.
You would be for a DREAM Act if the age cutoff was for minors. It was for minors who were here before they were 16 years old.
It was numbers that we can deal with. You know, right now...
All right, we're getting somewhere. we can negotiate a version of the DREAM Act with Mike before the night's over. Jose. One thing Mike has been saying is that we are on a lifeboat. This is a limited resources country. We can't take any more of these people. They are a drain. They are costing us money. That's ignoring the fact that, in fact, they are contributing massively to Social Security, billions and billions of dollars. And by the way, not making claims on it because many of them are using fake Social Security numbers. That money just goes straight into the trust funds, and they don't withdraw it. We have about 5 to 10% of the Social Security trust funds are due to immigrant labor coming into this country. So there's a very big contribution. What other things do you hear in this discussion that are getting distorted from the realities of what you know covering this story?
And by the way, talk about contributions. I invite you to go just in the outskirts of Phoenix, where Celso's from, where you can see people at 118 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer picking peppers for a 5-gallon barrel of paint for $1.25. And they're there day in and day out. And you don't find a lot of people that were born here that are willing to do that. But having said that, I just want to say one thing. I think that both political parties are playing political football with this. They're exploiting the Hispanic community, each in their own way. My conservative friends and my liberal friends both are not willing to deal with the reality, which is there are 11 million people here. 80% of the kids born to undocumented immigrants are like Celso. They were born in the United States or were here when they don't know any other country. And it's incumbent upon both political parties to quit the crap and get down to brass tacks and figure out what things they can do together to deal with immigration reform. They're not willing to do it, either one of them, because they're both willing to exploit this for their political short-term advantage.
Well, there's a lot of exploitation, but you know, there was a hearing that Chuck Schumer just held last year where Alan Greenspan talking about the H-1B visas where fraud runs rampantly.
That's right.
And Mr. Greenspan, who I think was one of the architects of the meltdown, said, well, you know, we've got to eliminate the difference in wages between skilled and unskilled workers. In his words, he accused middle-class Americans with skills of being the new privileged elite. Well, if you folks who are in the middle class think you're the privileged elite, God help all of us. So we're bringing in foreign workers who undercut Americans who are trying to support themselves. Look, we all want to give to charity, but you don't give to charity when your own children are going to sleep hungry at night. America is in crisis right now, and we can't bring the entire world here. And by the way, this isn't about race because of the people losing their jobs. It's every flavor of American who loses the job.
Mike, we're going to have to go ahead, Celso, quickly.
Then I would have to say that I graduated in business management. I want to be able to employ and solve that problem of hunger by creating jobs. I want to create opportunity. So give me that chance to contribute to this country. That's all I ask for.
All right, that's the last word for this segment. When we come back, more questions and comments from our live audience here at the University of San Diego. Stay with us.
Yeah, well, that's something that we have to work on, right? To make sure that people can be here with the right kind of papers, right? That's exactly right.
And we're back at our immigration town hall here at the University of San Diego with comments from the audience. Go ahead.
My name is Rosemary Johnston, and I'm a member of the San Diego Immigrant Rights Consortium. I live in a state where 1 in 4 residents is foreign-born, and in a community where 1 in 4 residents is foreign-born and where 86 languages are spoken, and I'm proud of that. I also live in the city that has the busiest migratory corridor in the world. I think in another 30 years, when our European counterparts are facing severe labor shortages because their birth rate has fallen below 2.0, that the United States will thank its immigrant brothers and sisters because we will have a healthy and plentiful labor force.
We're going to get to exactly that point in the next segment. Over here.
How you doing, Mr. O'Donnell? Thank you for coming. And I want to tell Mr. Cutler also thank you. I am that 911 force that you're talking about. I have been in the Navy for 15 years, serving proudly. And oh, no, thank you. But I have traveled, luckily, to Nebraska, for example. And I can tell the people at Fremont, it's really sad they couldn't come here today. But they could go a couple hours westbound towards the Panhandle and go to a town like, for example, Alliance, Nebraska. You go there, and this is a 10,000 people population. This town is supported by the 50% of them who are immigrants, Mexicans who work there in the fields, and they transport all the goods that are coming out of the potato and whatever else they have coming out of there. And this town remains vibrant because of the immigrant influx you have in there. At the same time, though, I want to know how you, as a commentator, as a journalist, the pundits, and also the politicians, how they can re-encourage and rekindle that basic need for Main Street America to think about working in the fields, because that's where all the goods that we are nourishing ourselves from, that's where it's supposed to be coming from our own local backyard, not from the grapes that I bought yesterday from Trader Joe's that came from Chile, for example. I want tomatoes that I can buy here. I want my avocados from California. I like that. And I have been in this country, like I said, for 15 years. I came straight from Mexico. I used to be a teacher over there before I joined the Navy. And I don't know if I will go back to Mexico when I get out. I get out like in 5 years. I can stay here, and I can have a great job here. I can go back to Mexico and have a great life over there. But Celso, for example, his life has been here. He's used to the American way, and he wants to be here.
Okay.
So I hope he can get to stay here with the DREAM Act. Thank you very much.
We're going to come back to the DREAM Act. Thanks for your comment. One more over here.
Hi, my name is Wendy Carrillo. I'm from East Los Angeles by way of El Salvador. I find some of the comments being made completely insulting and belittling. I, as an American citizen, don't want to be or have a legacy of an American that says that we have to take care of us before we take care of the rest of the world. And I would believe that most Americans feel the same way. In El Salvador, it costs the same as the United States for gas, milk, and eggs. And a salary is about $200 a month. And that's because of the continued colonization and marginalization of the United States toward Latin America and other countries. And I hope that we're able to have a discussion of comprehensive immigration reform as it deals directly with international foreign policy.
We're going to do that in the next segment, including a realistic framework on the economic issues involved in immigration. Mike, I want to give you a Twitter question that we have.
Sure.
And it says, many small government types yell about sending undocumented people back. What size government agency would they create to execute this?
Well, I think that
You've estimated 30 million undocumented people in this country. How many millions of government workers would you have to hire to move them back across the border?
No, it's not just about moving them back. We need a system that has integrity. You know, we naturalized 30,000 people 4 years ago without their files. They lost 111,000 files. This is the agency that handles citizenship and benefits. The whole system.
We're not talking about naturalizing them. We naturalize a very small number. We're talking about the 30 million or the 20 million. Yeah, it's a very small number in this big picture that we're talking about. How many people would you have to hire to do this?
I would like to see probably about as many ICE agents for the country as there are New York City police officers.
30,000. That can't possibly take on 13, 14 million people.
But what it does is it creates an environment that discourages illegal immigration. How many speeders get caught speeding, but we don't do away with the speed laws? You create a climate of deterrence.
But I think what Lawrence was saying is that we actually do know. I mean, I think this is where you kind of interject. 40% of the undocumented folks actually overstay their visa.
Or
so
work
we do
without
have a
permission or
tracking.
commit felonies.
So we actually have a tracking system, and I think we also.
But we don't. Not for that either.
But part of this conversation is that we have to first recognize that there's two different types of folks. You keep criminalizing the undocumented, and that's not acceptable because they're workers.
But let me make one
they're
point.
Workers, they're parents, and they serve in our military, and that's not okay. And I think once we stop, and once we can open up the conversation and we're not criminalizing a person who wants to feed their family, then I think
let me make one quick point. When someone runs the border, we don't know what motivated them. As an agent, I have arrested people working in factories who are wanted for murder. I arrested one guy who committed a murder, was deported, came back, escaped from a federal penitentiary here in the United States. When someone runs the border, we don't know why they did.
No, and you're absolutely right. We need a way so we actually know who's living within our borders.
Form wouldn't do it. You'd wind up giving a lot of people official identity documents.
No, actually, legalization would weed out the type of people that you're speaking about, because when people become legalized, they have to be fingerprinted, right? And I remember when the Bracero program ended, we legalized 500,000 people without any legislation. It kind of just happened, all right? You know, and the thing is that this has been the policy of the United States from day one. Every single immigrant group that's come to the United States has been legalized at one time or the other by some method or the other. So we're asking for legalization of our undocumented people. We're not asking for anything different than we've always had in the past. It's the same thing that we've always done. And so we need to do it. And actually, when we talk about the last amnesty law in 1986, which, by the way, the Democratic Congress has passed that law, Senator Kennedy, along with Congressman Howard Berman and others. But what happened? We had 4 million people that became legalized in this country. And guess what? You know, the world didn't end, right? I mean, you know, people assimilated, you know, people did the work.
But it encouraged more.
No, the thing is this, is that we've got to start thinking into the future. We can't, as was said earlier by Rosario Dawson, we can't keep thinking of doing things like we did in the past. We've got to think of the future. We've got to think of the globalization. We've got to think of people as human beings, not punish the victims, because they are the victims, and we keep punishing them and incarcerating them.
Because recognizing that you have been an active, you know, such an icon in our community, when you start talking about undocumented immigrants, and we're talking about immigration here, where would you stop? Because recognizing that there is, you know, we can't open all of our borders, right? But where would you stop? What do you think is sensible?
Well, as I said before, I think the ultimate answer is going to be that we have to help other countries develop their own economic systems, just like we did with Japan and Germany after World War II. We had the Marshall Plan. We gave them money to build up their economies. American corporations didn't go into Japan and take over their economy. We gave them the money to build their economies, both Japan and Germany. They did the same thing with Ireland, you know. The European Union did the same thing with Ireland because of the poverty there. So we've got to think in the big picture and not just keep punishing the people that are just coming here to work.
So quickly, let me get a last word from you on the DREAM Act. Secretary of Defense Gates is in favor of the DREAM Act, and it's because of people like Lance Corporal Jose Gutierrez, who was one of the first casualties in Iraq. He came here illegally from Guatemala as a child. He died when he was 22 years old, fighting for this country. He was granted citizenship when he was in his grave by an instantaneous act of our government, making the decision that, okay, he's contributed enough. What can we do, do you think, to get that citizenship award made earlier, made when we recognize the kind of kid that Jose Gutierrez was on his way to being?
Well, part of that solution is in the DREAM Act. There is a military aspect where you have an opportunity to either get a college education or serve in the military, either of which would allow you to have a temporary conditional residency and then be able to start and get in the line, get in the process to become a U.S. citizen. So it's not automatic citizenship. But to go back to what we were talking earlier, we can't just focus on enforcement only. Yes, we do have to secure our borders. We do have to make sure to find the undocumented people that are criminals, but that's not all the problem, and that's not going to solve the problem. We need to realize that there's a problem already in place, and it's because of a system that is broken, a broken immigration system that we need to fix, so we need to change those laws.
Okay, we're going to broaden the focus in the next segment. We have to take a break here. When we come back, everything old is new again. A look forward by looking back. So your community is changing, you're worried about rampant crime. Suddenly English isn't the only language you hear. Your schools are getting crowded with immigrant children. Sound familiar? Welcome to America. 100 years ago. What our own history can teach us about immigration when we come back. On January 2nd, 1892, a 15-year-old Irish girl named Annie Moore became the very first immigrant to be processed at Ellis Island in New York Harbor. My Irish ancestors arrived in similar style in Boston, most of them before there were any immigration laws in this country. For 62 years, Ellis Island was America's gateway for millions of immigrants. So if we're going to learn something about this issue from our own history, there is no better place to start. We went there with one of America's leading experts on the history of immigration, Professor Marcelo Suarez Orozco of New York University. $5,000 people a day came through here at the peak. 1/3 of our country, 100 million people, owe their citizenship to the people who came through this great hall.
Millions of dreams, stories about working to realize a better life.
The sounds we're hearing in the immigration debate today in this country, the anxiety, the fear, we've heard all that before, haven't we?
Yes, there's nothing more apple pie than anxiety and ambivalence about immigration.
We hear a lot of worries about crime with the illegal immigrant population that's in this country now. Hasn't that always been a worry, that crime will come with them?
Yes, and in fact the data show that immigrants, including unauthorized immigrants, are less likely to engage in crime than comparable samples of non-immigrant folk in the population. But the concern has been with us from the very, very beginning. There was huge fear about gangs from Ireland. It's amazing to think a century after the Irish first began to arrive in huge numbers here in New York, in Boston, that it took JFK to put to rest that enduring concern over loyalty, over trust. That has been at the center of every immigration wave in the history of our country.
At what point do we say immigration is good for us?
At times of economic anxiety, today or back then, there's always a pushback. When the unemployment rate in our country is below, say, 5-6%, immigration is not an issue. When the unemployment rate begins to climb, the debate over immigration becomes they're stealing jobs, they're taking jobs away. When, in fact, economists have reasonably established that immigration generates a very vigorous surplus to the U.S. economy.
We hear complaints about immigration from different sections of the country. Our southern border towns obviously very upset about it in many ways.
The solution to our immigration problems in the 21st century is not going to be the control of the border. Today, unlike 100 years ago, education will play a much, much more fundamental role in the making of new citizens, new workers, new Americans. Citizens who can function in more than one language, who can have insight into cultural practices, business practices from other parts of the world will give huge advantages moving forward. The question is, do we as a country have the energy that it takes to take on that challenge? Or have we given up on the shining light that Lady Liberty symbolizes to the entire world?
Joining us to talk more about where we've been, where we are going, Professor Marcelo Suarez Orozco. Also joining us, David Shirk, Director of the Transborder Institute and Associate Professor right here at the University of San Diego. And once again, actor, activist, and co-founder of Voto Latino, Rosario Dawson. Professor, when we were out at Ellis Island, I believe I heard you bring a reality check and a debunking to much of what we've heard here tonight. On the crime issue, it's hard to describe to people how suspect the Irish were as an immigrant population in relation to crime. In fact, in Boston, when they appointed the first Irish police officer, there was a protest about that officer saying, his name was Bernard McGinnis Skin, you can't make the Irish police